Hello and welcome to Hack It. I'm Sakshi, the CEO and founder of Food Hack. In each episode of Hack It, we'll be discussing females, founders, and of course food with some of my favorite people in the world. I've brought together some of my fellow founders to talk about their journeys, the challenges, the highs and lows of being a founder. And of course, we end each episode with a little nugget on food as medicine. I'm super excited to share this with you, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Hack It. Today I have a very special friend, girl power, superpower, dynamite, right here with me. And it's going to be a very special episode because we're going to talk about some personal experiences, founding her amazing business, pivoting a couple of times to find the right fit, and how she thinks about scaling it. So let's welcome Sophia, the amazing Sophia. I want to start by telling everybody your story because I remember when I first met you, your story is what stuck by, and I was like, I'm gonna need to know this girl for the rest of my life because what an amazing story. So take us through it.
Where do I start? I think the way I always describe it is like where my journey in mental health began. That's kind of what I work in. And it actually started about 12 years ago. So about 12 years ago, honestly, very nice childhood, can't complain, love my mum and dad. I was diagnosed with an eating disorder. So I had anorexia nervosa, which is basically you just lose a lot of body weight. And the reasons behind that, honestly, some are neurochemical, some are biological, but fundamentally it was lack of control. My whole life had kind of spun out of control. My best friend committed suicide very young. I was losing a lot of weight as a runner. And it just kind of felt like this entire life I'd been put on this pedestal and I was thrown off. And I was kind of like, how do I deal with that? During the period of my recovery, I ended up kind of, starting to realize that there were significant problems in mental health, right? We were not taught about it at school. No one had ever had, what is mental health? What happens if my friend gets sick? But in PSHE, we were taught how to put a banana on a condom, right? And it's like, which one's more important fundamentally at 12? It's, these things are going to happen to us in life and how do we deal with them? What does grief look like? What does trauma look like? So I ended up at about 17 launching what's now considered to be one of the biggest mental health campaigns ever in the UK to get mental health on the national curriculum. And we actually did it quite successfully. So that's where my journey in mental health began, but I don't want to ramble on about it, but that was the starting point.
That's amazing. Yeah. And then you had a bit of a personal setback, let's call it, with your mom, your amazing mom who's from Iran.
From Iran, yeah.
And has herself been a founder to multiple companies.
More successful one than me, yeah.
No, it's amazing. And she's also picked these taboo subjects to form companies on, which to me was fascinating when the first time I heard about her and I met her. So she ended up developing, an illness, a really bad illness, and you were quite young. And how did you kind of deal with that? And how did you, I would say that's trauma for any young girl.
Yeah.
Especially when you're so close to your mom and your mom's your hero, in your case. How did you deal with that trauma and what did you turn that trauma into?
Frankly, I don't think people teach you how to deal with trauma. I hoped that I would have been this amazingly empathetic person. I wasn't, I was angry. I think I was fuming that I'm very fatalistic. I was like, I've been such a fucking good person, so is my mum. How has she suddenly got, stage 3 bladder cancer? And I'm very dependent on my mum, and I can say that I am a child in all essence of the world. I call her 9 times a day. And suddenly I was like, I now have to care for you. And that for me I was so angry at her for having it. I was like, you can't die. Like, this is not allowed. And my initial response actually wasn't very nice. At the same time, I had 2 injuries in my legs. I had stress fractures in both feet. And I just actually lost the plot. And I think when I look back at it now, it was fear, right? I was just like, I have this other unknown. And instead of an eating disorder, which was the last one, it was just a lot of drinking. Like, my life was chaos. At some point, I kind of got through it and was like, actually, I should probably be more supportive now. I need to be an adult. Like, I can't throw a hissy fit because my mum is sick. And around that time, I realized that my mum kind of, as you said, is this incredible woman. She is a refugee. But two-time exited founder, now runs one of the biggest femtech companies out there. She also just got the Hilton contract for every Hilton hotel around the world. Like, this woman's crazy. But all I knew about my mum was who she is as a woman, right? Like, who she is as a mother. I was like, this is a woman who feeds me, who does this, who does that. And I was like, there's so much more to this woman's story. And I was like, I want to write a book about her because the books that I read are people like, white, rich, victorious men. and not women like my mother's, whose stories, frankly, are a lot more interesting. So I ended up trying to get a ghostwriter to write my mum's book. And the consistent kind of feedback was, it would be $100,000. And I was like, I'm on a full ride at college. Like, I can't afford $100,000. So I ended up writing it by hand. And, you know, I was speaking to my dad and her friends and ended up just learning so much about my mother as like a person rather than who she is to me. And after that, look, my mum recovered, but it was this amazing experience where I was like, family histories get lost, right? If you are not wealthy or victorious, your family history gets lost. And we don't have the same oral traditions that we did in like the old Middle Eastern culture. So I was like, okay, how do I actually turn this into a business? Because everyone at college was coming up to me being like, I loved what you did with your mum, right? What about my granddad? And I was like, it did take me a year, so I probably won't be making that much money given I also, you know, have a degree to get through and I'm on track. So I met this guy called Max, and we ended up actually building a natural language processing product that turned people's family conversations into fully published books for $150. And that ended up being my first company.
That's amazing. So you started your first company when you were at college?
Yeah, I was 19.
That's amazing. And what I love about that story, that's, you know, when the first time I met you, this is the story that really, you know, stuck by me, saying this young girl at 18, 19, took her trauma and actually, fine, you had your time to sort of deal with it, with your outbursts, but you took that trauma and you turned that into something really positive.
Yeah.
And it's not just positive for you and the business or for your mom, it's also positive for everybody else. Think about all those other refugee, amazing women and men who have these stories to share, but not everybody has 1 year and $100,000 on their hand to do it, right? But suddenly you've used, again, they talk about AI for good, right? So you've used technology for good, democratized that process and like made it available for many others, you know, to access and to create their autobiographies, you know, which are going to be alive forever, even after they pass away.
Well, I feel it's kind of the same as what you're doing, right? It's like you can be a for-profit, purposeful company.
Yeah.
And often I think we're often siloed into like, why are you trying to do good? Like, how can you make money if you're trying to do good? Like, how can you democratize an industry that actually makes a lot of money, right? Yours is quite similar.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you're actually doing something that costs a lot of money in general, right? It's like, you know, general meal plans for, you know, with a personal trainer is costing you a couple $100 a week.
Yeah.
And you're doing it for a fraction of that.
Yeah.
And people assume that like you can't want to help people and make money.
Yeah.
And that's something you're probably dealing with too, but it's really hard to be like, I can do both.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I think I say it out loud, openly all the time, that I think what gets all of us out of bed in the morning is the fact that we're also doing something good for people's health and the planet. Of course, there is the business side of things, which is exciting, and there's deals and there's new products getting launched and there's content. Actually, what gets us out of bed, you know, and what really kind of motivates us and pushes us as a team is the purpose element of the company. So I'm quite lucky that I was able to combine, you know, my story, my own story, and, you know, the business side of things along with the purpose. But it's so nice to see that, you know, at the age of 19. So this is, again, like, I think it's a great story for all those young 17, 18, 19-year-old entrepreneurial girls and boys, you know, where you can actually take that trauma and turn it into something positive. It doesn't have to always result in negative.
Yeah, totally. And I think one thing I learned was like, you know, what's the worst that's going to happen if I try? Right? I was like, if you see a problem in the world, try and solve it. And if you can't, at least you tried.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So from there on, you finished your college, you built this amazing company, and you came back to London to spend some time with your parents. But there was still this other entrepreneurial story in you that you wanted to explore.
I just wasn't done. I think you have this. It's like once you start, you're just like, can I go back to having a job now, like a real one? But yeah, you're right. I came back after COVID, and I'd been living in Boston. I'd come back to London, and I was kind of exploring what I wanted to do next. And actually, I had no idea. I thought it was going to be an AI personal trainer. I had no idea. And, you know, when I was 18, I always thought I'd solved the mental health crisis. I was like, I'm just going to get my Nobel Peace Prize now because, you know, I've sorted all the children out. And frankly, I had it, right? Everything that I thought I'd done in the last decade had actually got worse. You know, waiting lists for child adolescent mental health services had gone from 6 months to 2 years in those 10 years. You know, post-COVID, we saw what lack of social isolation did to kids. And I was like, clearly education wasn't the way to, like, I tried. I think we did some good, But it clearly wasn't the way to, make sure we actually lead happier and healthier lives. So I went back and was like, now that I have some level of technical commercial expertise, can I go back in and actually solve the problem I wanted to solve 10 years ago? And fundamentally, it came down to two things, and it was identical to Food Hack, prevention and personalization.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, in a classroom, we give kids the same lesson and expect them all to respond the same way. Doesn't work. And we're giving it to them often when it's too late. So my job is like, how can we actually teach clinicians as much about a patient while they're on that wait list before they come in, and actually enable clinicians to do a better job, because frankly, it can't all just be on a kid or a parent.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So tell us more about the origination of Kanjo and, some of the sort of COVID related, I don't know if you saw any difference pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID impact on mental health, on kids, and how sort of Kanjo kind of came about and what it's trying to do today.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on COVID, I've got to be honest. But look, I think the one thing we saw is from 1 to 5 is like the key areas for kids' socialization, right? It's when you learn how to stick up for yourself. It's how you learn to make friends. It's, you learn what does it look like when someone doesn't like you, right? And kids never had any of that for 3 years. So you have this generation of kids that actually don't have social skills, have been watching a ton of TV because their parents have to work, right? And suddenly we were seeing huge rates of ADHD. We have a massive increase in autism. Currently there are 1.5 million people on a wait list for autism in the UK. You're just kind of like, how did we get there? And I think COVID kind of compounded with, frankly, a fractured legacy healthcare system was like the worst case for mental health, right? Because how do we deal with millions of people who suddenly feel alone? And there was no answer to it, right? And I think a lot of really cool companies came out during COVID because suddenly there were these problems that had always existed and just got a lot worse. So went through EF, as did you, it's where I met you, and was like, I want to solve it, I'm not sure what to do, and actually built a kids game, which is the total opposite of what we do now. But we actually used digital biomarkers, so consumer, you definitely know this, basically behavior health insights from your consumer electronic device. And we looked at things like touching the screen of the phone to look at ADHD, spectral analysis of the microphone for mood. Really cool tech, but frankly, we were delivering insights to parents. And how can you get parents, we were delivering insights to parents that weren't actionable. Right, it's a good example if Food Hack told me that, I'm anemic, but then you didn't tell me how to deal with that anemia. Have you solved any problem whatsoever? It's the same thing. It's like, actually, your point is being like, you have anemia, but here's what you can do to, make it better, improve it. And we were giving parents, your child has ADHD. Good luck. It didn't work. And I think it was very, virtuous that we tried. But what was really interesting, every time we delivered those insights, clinicians were like, can we have them? And they were like, this will be really helpful for us to triage people, to track people, to do an earlier diagnosis. And I was like, if we're looking at product market fit, maybe I should just listen. And it's not going to be as sexy as this, cool little game. It's going to be a lot more like, how do we integrate into electronic health records? But that was a problem that needed to be solved. And most problems that need to be solved are not sexy.
Yeah. So that was an interesting transition for the business, where you transitioned from initially starting out as a D2C business into finding a potential product market fit into the B2B side of things, where you provide this as a SaaS solution to clinicians to better understand triage prevention.
Exactly.
Of, kids suffering from various mental health related diseases.
Exactly. And you have to learn a lot of different things. You're like, being a consumer founder is very different to B2B, right? So, you go from thinking about social media and writing newsletters, and suddenly I'm like, actually my job is I have to get on a plane and force people to sign a contract.
Right.
And then once you get one, the others come. But it was a very different, I'm now dealing with the 9-month sales cycle rather than can I get a parent to sign up?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of learning in the last year.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so how do you, as a founder of a mental health company, cope with stresses and pressures and keep your own mental health?
I don't.
Insanity.
I actually spoke about this quite recently at a talk. It's so funny for someone who is I was getting asked about what the best advice is to give to a founder. Is it get therapy, do X, do Y? And I was like, it's funny, you get taught all these things in therapy. And frankly, you don't listen to any of them when you're stressed, right? It's like, I know that when I'm stressed, I should take a step back, but I go heavier. So you can apply all these things to your life, but then when it comes to work, you just don't. You're like, I can keep going. And I've always said, you know, that everyone's like, Sophia's so resilient. Sophia's so resilient. I am, but ultimately resilience also comes at a price, right? It's like, she can push through. She can push through. And that's not what this is about. Like, this is, venture often kind of wants you to go like this. And actually I've decided I don't really want to do this all the time. It's like, there has to be my way is going to be like this. And like, how do I figure out what that looks like? So, you know, at the beginning of this company, I mean, you saw it quite often. I was just burnt out the entire time. You know, I'd have days where I couldn't get out of bed. And a lot of that was actually emotional load. It's like, if you are carrying the entire emotional load of a company, like, you have nothing left to give and nothing to give to yourself. And, you know, with rehiring and restructuring the company, I've been like, this emotional load needs to be shared. And if you want to be part of that company, you are taking it on. So I think a lot of that has been like, it's not allocation of roles, which obviously is important. It's, I need help and I would like you to take this on and make it your responsibility now. I'd say that was a big one. And the second is, and you know, I became a LinkedIn troll last week. I don't know if you saw it. So there was this founder. I never comment on random people's LinkedIns because I think it's so lame. But I see this founder and he writes this LinkedIn post about, you can't, if you take off weekends, you are wasting 28.53% of your capacity to work. If you take weekends off, you can never build a unicorn. And he goes, instead of doing that, I recommend you work weekends and drink 3 liters of water and 160 grams of protein. And I was like, you absolute prick. I was like, how, like, you have a platform and that's what you're telling people? Like, that is a route to burnout. And the assumption that if you work on weekends, you're suddenly going to build a unicorn is wrong. Right? I was like, actually, I'm not wasting that 28.53. I want to live it. Right? I want to spend time with my parents, right? My parents are not getting any younger. I want to be able to give myself an opportunity to find love because frankly, it's been on the back shelf for like years. I want to be able to exercise. I want to be able to see my friends. And if this all ends at some point, like 95% of these companies will die. I'm hoping mine is not one of them, but it might, right? The likelihood is one of ours does. What do I have left? You know, what's going to be on my gravestone? Is it going to be Sophia, founder of Kanjo, exited for 400 million, or is it going to be loving daughter, loving friend? And it's like, how do you balance that? And I think the last 6 months, I've really thought more about like, who is Sophia outside of Kanjo? Because for the last year and a half, everyone's known me as, you know, female founder, London female founder, Sophia does this. And I was like, actually, I just want to be a nice person. And like, I want to gratitude journal every morning. And that doesn't make me any weaker or limit my capacity to be as good as a founder of someone who works on the weekend. This is the way I want to work. I say that's like the big thing. It's like, there's a lot of shit out there. You don't need to follow it.
I can't believe this shit is like still being said out loud in today's day and age when you have trillion-dollar company founders from Jeff Bezos to, you know, the Google guys to, you know, Mark Zuckerberg and his founding team to, you know, everybody, all these amazing founders who've built these companies that are going to last a long time and we'll all remember them. And through their founding journey have come out and said that there is a very strong connection between your mind, body and soul.
Totally.
And if you're building a company, you're using your mind and body to a certain level. You want to get higher than your max, your P-max, there is a level. And you can only get there if you unlock that mind, body, soul connection, which only comes from utilizing that 28.53%.
Totally.
Right? Which comes from love, the happiness you feel, the connection you feel in your community, you know, the satisfaction you feel when you do something good for someone, right? Like that P-max plus level, which will help you accelerate your company from, I don't know, 400 million exit to a 4 trillion or whatever that number, 4 billion or 400 billion, whatever your ambitions are. Like that comes from exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The love you feel when you pat your dog or when you hug your mom or, you know, when you have lunch and not check your phone and have a real conversation and, you know, it's your hormones, it's your serotonin, your dopamine,
Totally.
your adrenaline, your, you know, it's all of that. So I'm so glad I didn't see that post on LinkedIn because I would have just
We got a lot of comments after I commented, and it was really relieving to actually see that everyone agreed with me. And these were great founders. These were unicorn founders being like, she's right.
Yeah.
And what's quite interesting, going off kind of that period of like, what do we do in that 25 point whatever time? My ex-boyfriend, very smart guy. I remember him saying to me, he was like, "Are you ever bored?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "There's always something going on in my day." He was like, "Do you know how many great ideas like come out of boredom?"
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, we never allow ourselves to be bored or just like sit with things.
Yeah.
And especially in our job, you can't, right? It's like, where's the next thing? Where's the next thing? And one thing I've like learned to do a little bit is like not be bored, but allow myself like time to think. Right? And I don't often we don't do that because, you know, if I really allowed myself time to think, the company would die. But it's like actually that time to think allows me to think about the next 6 months or like, you know, what do I actually think Kanjo wants to do? Right? So I also think like a big part of that is like boredom breeds really great ideas sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in that, actually. The problem I have with schools in the UK, my kids go to some of the best schools in the UK, and the problem I have is that my kids have zero opportunity to be bored. There is just zero opportunity. School starts from 8:39 in the morning, finishes at 3:30. Some, you know, almost actually every day they have an after-school activity, which finishes, you know, whatever 4:35. Right? It's like, where is the time for, you know, boredom? Like I want them to go out in the park, look at the trees, play around with the bark, I don't know, play with the mud. Like Curiosity, just like look at the different living creatures and be a little bored. You know, because being bored will help you think of problems in the universe.
I agree.
In the world. When you think of problems is when you want to come up with a solution. And people who come up with a solution and who end up executing that solution turn out to be entrepreneurs, like you and me.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a chain reaction.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's a real problem with the education system over here. I mean, people talk about Labour government, conservative, you know, elections coming in.
Remember to vote.
And like tax issues and all that. No one talks about structural issues.
Yeah.
You know, it all stems down to our education systems. You should see the food that is served in our NHS hospitals.
Yeah, I have.
Hospitals where these patients actually need food as medicine.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, because the governments are not able to understand this domino effect. You feed them crap. They've just had a cardiac operation and there are loads of doctors now talking about it out loud in the open. I've just treated my patients with a cardiac surgery. He's come out and he's been offered a ham and cheese sandwich. You know, which we know, like the white bread, the ham in there, red meat, processed red meat is known to be bad. Yeah. Right? And then that person is not able to recover. Then you end up paying for all the drugs. You keep paying all your life for all these drugs, and that's where the healthcare budget deficits happen.
Right? We love a Band-Aid. Right?
Yeah.
We love a Band-Aid in this country. It's like
everywhere, I think.
Yeah.
Everyone loves shortcuts.
Yeah. But it's like, would you give someone who hit their toe a crutch? Because at some point that toe might be a broken leg. Like that is what we're actually doing in mental health, right? And kind of what we do with food. It's like, you know, we're overweight. Do you want a Ozempic? You know, like it just Band-Aids. Whereas actually when we look at people who keep off weight, it's I believe in Ozempic for, you know, diabetics, like the use of it.
Of course.
But actually it's, are you walking around? Are you eating well?
Yeah.
You know, how do we live a longer, happier life? And actually it takes time.
Yeah. And I think that you're making a very interesting point because it's really sad to see that, you know, this over-medication is penetrating, you know, other disease areas. So mental health was one that was sort of, you know, unsolved for, and everybody started talking about it everybody suddenly started talking about it everywhere, right? And so they were just like, when everyone starts talking about a subject, it becomes a hype.
Yeah.
It becomes a fad, right? And then you're always looking for these band-aids. No, give me a solution now. Let's go to drugs, because drugs will solve it. Instantly, they'll give governments the results. Governments want to talk about it. Press will start posting about it. Look, this government so pro this and that. But what ends up happening is the common man ends up suffering.
Yeah.
With over-medication, addiction issues. It's really sad. You can't reverse some of these things. Some people just don't have that willpower to be able to get off this drug and be able to carry on life as normal. So it's really sad to hear that we had this in mental health. We have this in cardiovascular diseases, like statins being like number one. People have been trying to put me on statins for like a decade now. And I refuse to. Because I know I have genetic, you know, high LDL, which is a bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
But I also have very high HDL, which is a good thing, which is a good cholesterol, which means my diet and lifestyle are very good. So one counteracts the other. And I know every single member of my family has high LDL, slightly elevated, right? And I know that with age, it gets worse, right? But not one doctor has said to me that, hey, why don't you try a plant-based diet? Or why don't you try these superfoods? There's a lot of clinical research that actually shows that certain foods, for example, there are these like Indian gooseberries. It's called amla in Hindi. I grew up hearing about it. The problem in India was it's the land of Ayurveda, right? So our grandmothers, our mums would try and bring these amazing ingredients into our lives, but they just didn't have the science to back it up. So as a kid, you're growing up in this era of math, biology, chemistry. We're all scientists, you know. We're all like, give me the proof. Otherwise, I'm not consuming it, you know, because it doesn't taste good, right? They just weren't able to give us these, you know, science-based facts, which hopefully now we're going to change with the Food Hack app because you have all the science in your hand. But there's so much clinical research out there to show that if you have Indian gooseberries and you try that in a population with high cholesterol, and you have statins and you try that in a population of high cholesterol, you will see the same decline in cholesterol.
Yeah.
There are so many papers. There's not one paper. There's so many papers. But how is it that not one single doctor over these last, whatever, decade or two has ever told me about it, has ever mentioned diet or lifestyle to manage this? It's ridiculous. If I wasn't in this field, doing the work I'm doing, I would have been on statins.
Do you believe that, me and you sometimes bicker about this, which, and is it healthy? My dad's a doctor, so we do believe in medication, right? I'm very honest about that. It's like, do I think that blueberries are anti-inflammatory enough to make my foot better? Probably not, right? I will need my ibuprofens and I will need cortisol injections. Where is the balance that you find within like needing medication and using food as medicine? Like, I believe they go hand in hand, right? It's like, sometimes you will need both, sometimes you'll need one, sometimes you'll need the other. But I guess, how do you, given that you're such a, you know, spokesperson for food as medicine, think about actually the fact that sometimes we do just need meds?
Yeah. So I think what I would do, so the 4 horsemen, like we talk about at Food Hack, right, which basically end up getting 90% of us. Like, what I mean by that is that's the reason for 90% of all our deaths in the future. Right, that is cardiovascular disease, it's cancers, diabetes, and Alzheimer's, or mental health, right? These are the 4 horsemen. And actually, all 4 of these are chronic conditions. And they have links with, well, besides cancer, you can't really qualify that. But all 4 of them have links with nutrition and lifestyle, right? Like, if you look at even cancers, you know, you could say 50% is genetic, like actual like faults in your DNA, like the ATCG, there has been a, you know, kink in there, and maybe you can use technologies like CRISPR to go and, you know, cut out the bad gene and put in the good gene. One day that'll start happening. It's happening today anyway, but it'll start happening at an affordable enough cost, right? But the other 50% is epigenetics. Epigenetics is the impact on our genes from our lifestyle and our environment. A big part of that is food, exercise, sleep, mindfulness, right? Stuff like that. So actually all 4 of these horsemen have links with nutrition and our lifestyle. So the way if I were a doctor, right, I would first urge people to make a lifestyle change.
But this is prior to a diagnosis of one of these things, I assume.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, actually, before I put them on, like, because, you know, you're right, our healthcare system is based on, you know, prescribing people medication, right?
Yeah,
but
ROI, it's return on investment, right?
Yeah, but I would kind of change that a little bit, right? It should be more outcome driven. So you get reimbursed as a doctor if you see a positive outcome, right? With the lowest possible bills on medication. That's how I would do it. It's an equation, it's a ratio. So what that would urge me to do is, when you come to me and I understand that you have, let's say, elevated cholesterol in my case, or let's say you have ADHD, right? What I would say is, okay, let's talk about your lifestyle. Tell me exactly what you do day to day, 7 days a week, right? I will understand your exercise patterns. I would understand your nutrition. I'd understand your sleep, and I would understand your mindfulness, gratitude journaling, or whatever, right? And I would then, like, honestly, nutrition contributes to 70 to 80% of all these, out of these 4 variables, right? And I would actually change your nutrition completely. I would look at clinical papers. And okay, sure, like, doing it manually is tough, but now you have apps like Food Hack, right? We have cleaned up these clinical papers, and only on the basis of the most cleaned and validated clinical research, unbiased clinical research, we tell you that these are the foods that help you with ADHD, and these are the foods that help you with elevated cholesterol. And these are the foods you should avoid for ADHD and avoid for cardio. Right? I would use the assistance of software solutions, right, to then put you on a certain diet, give you a try for 3 months. 3 months is not a lot, by the way. How often do you see your doctor in like 3 months? Not that much.
I don't.
Exactly, right? But I would put you on a program, 3 months. These are the lifestyle changes you're going to do, right? And then you have to come back to me in 3 months. We're going to check your markers, and then we're going to prescribe medication
if needed,
right? Sometimes it's going to be magical. Like if you're diabetic and you wear whatever these CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, you're going to be seeing the results real time, and it's going to be so encouraging. If you're eating a low glycemic meal plan or a low glycemic lifestyle, it's going to be so encouraging for you to kind of
continue doing it.
Nobody wants to be eating medicines, by the way, right? Like,
no, it's not fun.
It's not fun, right? And then after 3 months, there might be cases where it's like, how about, did you manage this life? Did you enjoy the, because habit formation takes about 21 days.
Yeah.
So if they've been eating like this and they've been exercising and sleeping and meditating and all that stuff, right? You start to enjoy it. Because your hormones, right? Like your serotonin levels, the long-term happiness hormone, that starts to kick in and stuff. So then maybe in the most extreme cases, you take that baby dose of the medicine that's required and you combine it with these lifestyle changes.
But this is more on the prevention side rather than the curing side.
No, I'm talking about the curing side also. So like say you have elevated cholesterol, right? Like in my case. So we tried the diet and lifestyle changes for 3 months. I go back, right? We see the impact on my cholesterol levels, right? And even then, if the doctor thinks that you require a certain level of medication, you combine the lifestyle with the baby dose, right? To continue to drop the cholesterol down, and you never know. Maybe the next step next year might be that you can get off medication and now continue this lifestyle altogether.
Well, they have that with, it was quite interesting when my mum had cancer. So obviously with cancer, you need to do your chemo and your radiotherapy. We know that's the way it works. But she was also had to be on an anti-sugar diet, right? So
because cancer feeds
off sugar. Yeah. So kind of agreeing with you, I think like when it comes to curing, there is a way of doing both, but thinking about prevention first. Don't know how we got onto that. We sidetracked quite a bit.
No, but I think it's really important to talk about links between diseases, right? Because that's kind of what you do. You look at mental health. We look at, the 4 horsemen. Again, it's so important to talk about lifestyle and nutrition and links with these diseases.
Yeah. I think there's a balance though, right? So me, it's actually kind of like slightly back and forth because obviously with an eating disorder, you actually don't want to think too much about food, right? So for me, it's like I've always believed that repression breeds obsession.
Yeah.
So if I want a square of chocolate and I don't have it, I will be thinking about my chocolate for about the whole night, right? And then I end up having a bar. I've never had that, so I always believe in like intuitive eating what my body feels right, and I think I look pretty healthy. I'm pretty good at sport. So I guess my question to you, I'm now interviewing you, but it's quite fun. I guess it's like, how do you make that balance of allowing people kind of the like cognitive freedom with food versus feeling like they're on a diet plan?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and that is exactly why Food Hack exists. If you look at the meals that we have on our platform, they don't look like diet food. By the way, that is exactly what differentiates us, is that our food is tasty. When people ask me, so your IP, is this like science-backed, intelligent food? And, you've got this dish that helps you, which is cholesterol. I was like, forget all that, right? If you start taking the bad stuff out and putting the good stuff into food, you'll automatically achieve those things. Low cal, low sat fats, low glycemic, leave all that. What is my IP is that this food tastes as good as a full-fat, disgusting, fried piece of shit on your plate. And that's the guarantee I take. And we keep rotating our menu every week or every other week. We launch a new dish, right? We look at world flavors, right? Like we look at indulgent stuff. Like we have pasta, we have gnocchi, but it's just made with cauliflower.
Yeah.
And it's made fresh in our factory, So it's like there isn't anything that we are depriving you of. Yes, it is free from gluten, it is free from refined sugars, it is free from dairy, because we have found links with all these 3 things and inflammation, which is the root cause of all diseases.
But I like gluten. What about that?
That's fine.
Am I allowed to eat gluten?
Of course. Like for example, like on Saturdays, actually the problem with habit formation is that now I don't crave it anymore. But a long time back, I've always been on Food Hack since my issue, because I genuinely love the taste of the food.
Your food's great.
Yeah, like if I go to a restaurant, I just feel like it's not worth the calories because it's just not tasty enough for me.
Yeah.
So I've always been on Food Hack, but actually there was a phase where on Saturday mornings, I would love to go with the boys to this bakery near my house, and I would love to have this cheese straw. No, but I am allowed to, because it's about 80-20 rule in life, right? If majority of the time you're just being mindful about what you're eating, right? Like you've subscribed, let's say I have cholesterol, I've subscribed to this meal plan which is low in sat fats, which helps with my cholesterol levels. It's plant-based, and I've enjoyed all the food Monday to Friday. Of course I can eat gluten whenever. Like, that's exactly what we say at Food Hack. This is to help you go out on the Saturday or the Friday and not think. Eat whatever you want to eat.
Yeah.
Because you've looked after yourself for the other 4 days or 5 days or 3 days, but commit on a weekly basis to a certain lifestyle.
I have a question, actually. And this is something this is a problem with the industry I've had in general. And I know you don't do it, so I'm asking how you got around it. Is we've often had these like very, I'd say inappropriate or painful like attributes we design to food, right? So we have good food, we have bad food, we have cheat meals.
Yeah.
Like I think that's shit, frankly. I don't think there is such thing as like, I don't feel like when I eat, I cheat, right? I was like, that's not the way we should be labeling food, particularly for young women. So how do you create an environment of like, this is healthy, but it's not a punishment? Like, there's a penalizing language around food, which predominantly is focused on women, right?
Yeah. I love that. I mean, this is something we think a lot about at Food Hack, right? And which is why I was telling you, like, even when I tell anybody about Food Hack, I say it's the tastiest thing you'll find, right, in the market, because we understand what matters in life is adherence to a certain lifestyle. That's what gives you longevity, which is how do you live longer without the 4 horsemen?
Yeah.
Right? And the only way you can adhere over a long period of time is if you don't sacrifice on flavors and tastes and variety and all of that. Right? And even in our messaging, what we've started to now do, I think initially our messaging was very much of food is medicine, because there was an education piece, because nobody in the UK had heard about food as medicine, right? This stuff kind of starts in America and all that, and then it kind of passes on to the rest of the world. In the UK, we were the first to talk about, if you don't eat your food like your medicine today, as early as you can, you will end up eating your medicine like your food.
Yeah.
So the early years were all about like just educating people about links between nutrition and, lifestyle and diseases and prevention. Now that we've been in the market for over 2 years, our messaging is changing, where it's like very much focused on flavors and variety, and we've started adding non-plant-based things as well.
Okay.
Because we were listening to our customers, right? We were understanding, what are you eating? They were like, like some of our customers, like the females were quite happy eating plant-based, but the males were combining it with a grilled fish or chicken or whatever. But again, very health and wellness focused market. So we listen to them. Like, it's not fair to charge them, for a convenience meal delivered to their door, but then they have to add something.
Yeah.
It's not fair. Right? So then we went out, we started sourcing the most, carbon footprint, ethical way of treating animals, like these farms in the UK. And yes, like our margins were sacrificed because of that. But, at the end of the day, we're providing people with really high ingredient. There's nothing on our menu that's missing, by the way. Like, you find anything. If someone wants a fish, someone wants a salad, it's there. Someone wants a curry, it's there. Someone wants a soup, it's there. Someone wants an Indian, it's there. Japanese, it's there. Like, there's nothing that's missing.
Yeah.
Right? So now our messaging is about everything you want in abundance. It's all there. It's delicious, but it's a way of eating. It's a way of mindful eating, right? That's it. So that's how we've tackled the issue. Is you start out with a messaging of food is your medicine.
Yeah.
Transition over to, but it's also tasty, and it's tasty first.
So how do you you're in the nutrition industry, but you're not in the fitness, right? But obviously they overlap quite a lot.
They do.
As saying someone who was a professional athlete, I guess I can speak about it a bit, but I was like, these things don't work in isolation, right? So I could eat all the food hack in the world, but actually I'm out there smoking my vape and I'm barely walking and I'm depressed. So how do you end up helping people your job needs those other things to be done well alongside that?
Yeah.
It's like, what happens on the educational side of food hack that means that people know that this isn't like a quick fix, this isn't like a juice diet, like a juice cleanse.
Yeah. I think that is exactly why we started out on this tech journey 3 years ago, which is because I knew that food is what we're trying to accomplish, this lifestyle change. It can't just happen with food products, because A, not everybody can afford it week on week, right? And B, we live in the era of smartphones, right? Where everyone, the way you can actually tackle this issue is by combining the digital with the physical world.
Yeah.
So physical world, you have products. In products, you have chilled meals for people like me who have zero time to cook, but I want intelligent food that's designed for me, personalized for me. And then we also have these snacks that you can see in front of you, right? Which is for those people who are on the go, they're traveling, airplanes, all of that. Now you have something better for you, right? Sustenance for the flight or whatever. In the digital world, you have an app that's for free, right? That people can use to access clinical research on food. And I feel that, a lot of our competitors or whatever, they charge for this kind of knowledge. Whereas we believe that if you're in Middle England and you are diabetic or pre-diabetic, you should have food as medicine available to you for free.
Yeah.
Right? Suddenly, if you start using the app and you start personalizing your recipes and ingredients and stuff like that, I believe that that's when, there is a conscious part of your brain and there's an unconscious part of your brain, right? And believe it or not, behaviors, or this sort of knowledge, it starts settling into both parts of the brain, right? And I think that somewhere the unconscious helps you make better choices if you're training. That you'd automatically, if you eat better, you're in better mood.
Yeah, I agree.
Good food, good mood is a real thing. We talked about it at your podcast.
Yeah.
Right? There's over 1,000 neurons that are linked with your gut to your brain.
Yeah.
Right? So if you eat well, your gut microflora is well fed, you're happier, you're in good mood, which means you want to go and exercise or you want to walk rather than get on that bus or whatever.
Yeah, they're pretty symbiotic. Yeah.
So it's this cycle, right? So one promotes the other. You automatically don't feel like drinking in the night, or if you do, you won't have that extra 1 or 2 glasses that would have ruined your sleep. So we feel that this is how we are trying to solve it, is by creating this app and surrounding you with a better for you food choice.
Pretty good.
Yeah. And actually talking about the tech engine, what I love to do on this podcast is to pull out something like an ingredient that all of us have in our diets and then tell you the science behind it, what the engine found.
Okay.
So today we picked cranberries.
I like cranberries.
And exactly, in salads and, whatever.
Sure.
So our engine actually pulled out 43 clinical papers which talk about cranberries' benefits.
Okay.
And again, this is another way we feel that if people really understand all this stuff, then maybe they get
I know one.
about it.
I know one.
Which is?
This is probably TMI, but urinary tract infections.
No, it's true.
Honestly, it's like a big
true.
one. My mum would always make me drink cranberry juice whenever I had a UTI.
Yeah, but I think you'd be
And it
better
helped.
off having a handful of cranberries rather than that.
I was a kid. I was
know,
not going
fair
to eat a
enough,
lot
fair
of...
enough.
But honestly, it works so well.
There's actually clinical benefits proving it. And the other deeper benefits are also helps with hypertension, we spoke about. It is great for, even in oncology disease prevention, people have seen links in it. Oral cavity infections and tooth decay.
Which is interesting given it's sweet.
Yeah, exactly. This is the fiber side of things that helps. And also gastroenteric diseases. Thank you for this amazing podcast.
Thank
and
you.
It was so different from the others because you actually got to interview me.
Sorry,
which
it
never
happens. I always do it.
But you know what? It's so good because someone should interview me.
Yeah,
no
it's
one's ever
good.
interviewed me.
I
on
love
this
interviewing
podcast.
you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to Hack It. I hope you enjoyed the insights and stories that we shared today. Are you hungry for more? Follow us on Instagram at The Food Hack. That's a hack without a C. Or subscribe now to be the first to hear about our next episode when it drops. See you next time.